I'm also a health coach as well. So I have my hand in all of the things here. So for those who are not aware, Amla Vita, we are a coaching company. So we have career coaching. So most of our clients come to us for career help, whether it's finding their next career, whether they're transitioning, unemployed, whatever it is. We do a really, really deep dive into helping you uncover what your passion is so that you can learn to love your life, which is in our name. I'm Lavita. I usually have, our light isn't on. I'll turn our light on. It says love your life right back there. We also have leadership coaching. We have life coaching. We also have health and wellness coaching. Health coach right here. So we cover a lot of different things, but really our whole focus is helping people and helping our clients break down all of these old habits, old beliefs, old patterns to help them really uncover what their true calling, their true passion is. I will make sure to send a follow-up email with a lot of everything that we're talking about today, as well as some of the additional resources from Work Friendly, some of the fun stuff that Amala Vita has going on. So keep an eye out for that follow-up email a little bit later on. All right, so I will go ahead, just a few housekeeping rules really quick. Most people, I don't even have to say this, stay on mute. But if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat box, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. And I will keep an eye on that throughout the presentation. So any questions that you have for Tessa and Celia, I'll make sure to save those at the end for Q&A. So go ahead, put everything in the chat. Feel free to introduce yourselves, network, use the chat as a way to meet other people. It's always fun to connect with new people here. All right, so enough talking from me. I am going to hand it over to the lovely ladies of Work Friendly, and we'll take it away from there. Thanks, ladies.
Thanks, Jill.
Awesome. Can everyone see my screen? Just give me a thumbs up. Great.
Great. So we're so excited to be with you all today. Thank you for tuning in. Celia and I are going to be talking about how to prepare for annual performance reviews. So we'll kind of dive in deep, and then looking forward to answering some questions you might have throughout at the very end. So to start, we just want to introduce ourselves. Celia, I'll let you introduce yourself first.
Awesome. So my name is Celia Balson, and I am the founder and CEO of Work Friendly. I'll let Tessa introduce herself, but a real quick overview of who Work Friendly is. Work Friendly is an HR and recruiting consulting company that is based here in Chicago. We work with companies as small as two to as large as, in some cases, 1,000 employees. We provide HR and recruiting resources to companies that either don't have HR recruiting teams internally, or maybe you do have a team internally, but that team just needs a little bit of extra help putting something together, like let's say performance reviews or employee handbooks, just to name a few. There are 4 of us, and we actually have been around now for about 4 years. So really excited to be here with you guys, and also super excited that we were asked to join a webinar like this because Ama La Vida is one of our most favorite clients that we work with.
Absolutely. And I am Tessa Maurice. I am a people expert with Work Friendly. So I work with Celia, and I would be partnering with companies who need help as kind of their HR practitioner, if you will. And then the last thing we just wanted to start with is to share our perspective. So as Celia mentioned, we are typically on the employer side of things. We work in human resources on the employer side. So what we did here is we tried to take that perspective and offer tips and tricks for the employee. So we're going to be discussing things that we know on the employer side that we think you guys can use as employees to then come to the employer. So just keep that in mind as we talk through this, that our expertise is really on the other side of things. And if you have questions, feel free to reach out with questions on the employer side as well.
Awesome. So let's go over today's agenda. So today we are going to provide an overview of performance reviews. We'll go over how to give and receive feedback, how to ask for a raise, and how to actually prepare for your annual performance review. And then, as Tessa mentioned, last but not least, we'll open up to all of you guys and we'll answer some of your questions.
Awesome. So first and foremost, why are performance reviews important? So we want to first lay out that every company does this differently. We work with a huge range of companies and we've seen it done differently in every single one of our clients. So it's really hard to use this as blanket statements, but take these kind of pieces and hopefully they can apply to your situation. Some companies will do performance evaluations once a year, sometimes quarterly, sometimes monthly, sometimes not at all. Maybe they don't have a set structure in place and you as the employee want a review. And so you're going to your employer and asking for one. The second thing we want to kind of chat about is this is an opportunity for you to have a one-on-one conversation with your direct supporter or manager about your development. So I think often, even if you have weekly one-on-ones which is awesome, set up with your direct manager, so often it's tailored to the day-to-day execution kind of checklists, to-do lists. And this is like a set time for you to just talk about your goals and your development. It's also an opportunity to discuss total rewards. So some companies might utilize annual reviews to evaluate teams' compensation to make sure, that they're competitive within the market and that the employees are being, paid what they deserve. Sometimes it isn't necessarily tied with compensation, but it might be a time to discuss other rewards. So maybe commuter benefit or a medical benefit, maybe an educational stipend of sorts. So that's what we mean when we refer to total rewards. And last but not least, this is a time for you to give feedback as well as ask for feedback. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that next.
Awesome. Thanks, Tessa. So as Tessa mentioned, our next topic is giving and receiving feedback. So I think we could all agree that feedback is super important. And it's a funny thing because some people love to receive it, some people hate to receive it, but I can tell you most people find it actually very difficult to give feedback. And that can be a problem because feedback is most certainly very important. Without providing feedback, there really isn't an opportunity for improvement, development, or growth. Now, there's an undeniable correlation between feedback and performance. When managers are regularly providing you feedback about the quality or the quantity of their employees' work, they're more likely to fully understand what the employee needs in order to continue, their best possible performance, make improvements on maybe mediocre or poor performance. Feedback conversations are also an open opportunity for, just open dialogue. As Tessa mentioned, there are many ways that you can use these performance review conversations. So I would just say you can use these times as an opportunity to discuss your past performance and give feedback on past performance. Give feedback on maybe ideas that you have for the future, for your future performance or the company's future performance. And also use it as a time to just jumpstart conversations as far as growth goes, and maybe where you personally want to go in your career. Next, building trust through feedback exchanges. So during the feedback session, the employer or the manager and the employee are both at a very vulnerable state, right? Your guard is down and you're ready to have an open and honest conversation. These times will allow you and your manager to actually build a stronger relationship, a more solid foundation so that in the future, when things do come up in the moment, you trust each other enough and you're comfortable enough that you're able to give each other feedback, whether that be upward feedback, you're giving that feedback to your manager or to someone who's more senior than you, or for your manager to give you that direct coaching in the moment based on that foundation of trust, instead of waiting for a more formalized performance review.
Awesome. So when talking about receiving feedback, I think first and foremost, it's not easy, especially if it involves some type of evaluation. It's sometimes difficult for the receiver to hear or accept. There's also this perception versus reality thing. So how you perceive yourself or your actions may not necessarily align with how others perceive you. And this is just an important growth opportunity to if you're hearing things that you don't necessarily agree with, maybe you need to reflect or gain other feedback from other people to see, is this one person's perspective, or is this really how others perceive me overall and I just didn't notice? And that's this kind of self-awareness piece that's really important in professional growth and personal growth, honestly. I think for feedback as well, if you aren't receiving it the way that you want it or at all, it's important to ask directly. So maybe you could say something along the lines of, okay, I shared with you areas I think I excel in or I could use work in. I'd like to hear from you if you agree, disagree, or have anything to add. Often in conversations like this, the employer will start with, or at least ask for the employee's perspective, which is great. You want it to be a sharing opportunity, but you also want to hear, are you aligned with what you're saying? And so that would be your opportunity to ask directly for feedback. Am I hitting the mark? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Is there something you want to add? And then the last but not least, ask for examples or instances. It's hard. It's also difficult to give feedback, and managers may not know how to do that or need a little bit of practice. And so if a manager tells you, you could work on your communication skills, well, that's very vague and very broad. And so I would ask for specific instances, because this could mean a multitude of things, and it's really hard for you to work on communication skills if you don't know, is it your punctuality? Is it your follow-ups? Is it your professionalism in your email writing? Is it hitting deadlines? There's just a multitude of things that it could be. And so asking for specific instances of, okay, that's great feedback, I'd really like to work on that. Can you give me one or two examples of when I didn't meet expectations, or what I could do differently in the future?
Awesome. So we're going to go in a little bit deeper into how to give feedback specifically. So for the purposes of this slide, we're going to focus on a term that you all may have heard in the past, upward feedback, which I referred to earlier. And just to define it, this is a term that's used to describe when an employee is providing feedback to either their manager or someone who is supporting them. So first and foremost, you'll want to focus more on the positives than the negatives when giving feedback. So some of you may have heard of the compliment sandwich. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about and are already in the middle of their lunch right now because it is lunchtime, or thinking about a sandwich you're going to have for lunch, I'll explain what the compliment sandwich actually means. So the idea is to start with a little bit of praise, then give a little bit of criticism, or in this case, when talking about feedback, you'd give your constructive feedback, and then you would finish it off with a bit more praise. So the visual representation of this looks like, the bread being the praise, and then the meat of the sandwich being that constructive feedback. I'm sure most of you can think back to a time where you may have received the compliment sandwich, or maybe you've given it without even knowing it. The purpose of giving feedback in this format is to really increase the likelihood that people will receive, process, and act on the constructive feedback in the way that you want them to. So in other words, you'll want to frame that constructive feedback with a hefty scoop of praise. So like Tessa was just talking about, self-perception versus the way that other people perceive you. This is a way to make sure that the feedback that you are sharing is indeed heard. Second, you'll want to make sure that you don't wait. When giving feedback, if you wait 3 months to tell someone about something in regards to their performance, they usually aren't going to remember what that instance was, what that example was 3 months ago, because it happened so long ago. We all have a ton going on. As time goes on, our memories will fade, and we're more likely to misinterpret situations. So if critical feedback is left unsaid, then you run the risk of that potential issue or problem reoccurring and maybe even multiplying or getting worse by a domino effect, because time has gone on without that feedback having been given. It's much easier to give feedback immediately. Everything's fresh in both parties' minds. And honestly, if something's worth noting, if feedback's worth giving, then it's worth giving immediately. Next, you'll want to make sure that you get specific. So Tessa also mentioned this when it comes to receiving feedback. You'll want to make sure that the feedback that you're giving is tied to very specific examples. It should be task-focused, crystal clear, and to the point. If you stick to the facts, it'll also make it easier for you to give the feedback because you're more likely to leave your emotions out of it, which will allow you to focus more on performance rather than personality. I would say what's most important just to keep in mind when you are giving feedback, or even when you're on the receiving end, is that feedback is meant to be done in a conversational format. It should never be one-sided. You'll want to make sure that it is a conversation and you allow the feedback recipient an opportunity to speak. This will allow you to clarify the feedback that you're providing based on questions that the recipient might ask, see if your feedback actually lands, and also just garner buy-in from the feedback recipient. This will actually enable you to increase his or her motivation to actually implement the feedback and strengthen the relationship between the person providing the feedback and the recipient through open and honest, genuine dialogue.
Okay, so the fun part, asking for a raise. This could be really nerve-wracking and hard, but you have to advocate for yourself, and it's important. So let's come prepared. And how do we prepare for that? So the first thing we always say is data, data, data. It's hard to argue data, right? And so if you've done that research and you come with the research to show them, it's a lot more difficult for someone to say, no, that doesn't make sense, or no, we're not going to do that. So some companies do in-depth compensation analyses. They have their own data, and maybe they're reviewing that on an annual basis. Other companies don't. So it really will depend on your company and their compensation model. But one piece of advice would be, if you're asking for a raise, you should always come prepared with your own market research. So what does this look like? We actually do this a lot in HR, as we're defining maybe we're hiring for a new role. We'll go out and do our market research to make sure that what we're offering and what's in budget actually matches the market, so that we can be competitive and get great candidates, and also so that we're paying people their fair amount for what we're asking them to do. What this could look like, there are definitely paid sites that you can get data from, but there are free sites as well. So you could use salary.com, you could use payscale.com. LinkedIn now has something called LinkedIn Salary. What they'll do is they'll have you type in your job title and where you're located, and they'll give you a range. Now, with that said, the ranges are usually huge. So you kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, but what we recommend is maybe go to 4 or 5 different websites, take the ranges and the averages, and that's just, again, more supportive data for you to come forward and say, I think I fall within here. It'll show that you've done the work and that you really care and that you have earned and deserve what you're asking for. The second part is, again, be prepared and be specific. So come to the conversation with the data, have it. Maybe it's a document, maybe it's a Google Doc if it's virtual. But use a visual, show that you've done that research, not just, I looked it up, I Googled it, and it should be about this. You want to show all the work that you've put into it. You want to come to the conversation with when your last raise was and the amount, because that's another thing that they're going, oh, well, we'll have to look at when. Well, if you come prepared with what it is and specifically what you're looking for, then you've already done the work for them. Maybe bring performance statistics from the previous year. So I hit my goals, X, Y, and Z. That's really easy to do if your company is very good at setting goals and setting baselines for you to hit. Not all companies are there yet. And so if not, do bring as much as you can. And then just come prepared to discuss the goals for your role in the next year. So with this raise, this is why I deserve it, because my goals for next year in this role are to do X, Y, and Z. And then you're tying the compensation with the goals. You also want to make sure you know the why. So just be clear on why you deserve the raise, based on the data that you researched, the performance that you've exhibited, and the date and contributions that you received previously. And then everything you plan to do in the future, or at least in the next year. And then if possible, show the return on investment. This is huge. If you can prove, and this isn't always easy, and for certain roles, it's easier than others. So bear with me, but if you can somehow prove that your contributions to the company are important, are going to be a return on investment. So it's going to save them money in the future if they give you the raise to do this work versus hiring someone new or XYZ, again, depending on what the role is. If you can prove that, that's huge. It's really hard for them, again, to kind of deny that to you if you're proving that this is going to work out in their favor, essentially.
Awesome. So we're at the end of our presentation. We got through that actually pretty quickly. So to wrap things up, let's go over what we learned today. In preparing for our annual review, like Tessa mentioned, with preparing to ask for a raise, as well as when it comes to preparing for a feedback session, you'll want to make sure that you do your homework in relation to your past performance, future performance plans, any compensation research that needs to be done in advance. You'll want to come prepared with questions for your manager, come prepared with feedback that you'd also like to share with your manager or with just the company in general. And invest in your growth. You want to spend some time thinking about what it is that you want for yourself in your future career, or, in some cases, companies who look at the whole person, your personal life, and in your career. This is dedicated time in an annual performance review where it is just you and your manager. So it is time literally to just focus on you and yourself and your goals and your achievements and your development. So take advantage of it. And with that, I will open it up to you guys for questions. We'd love to hear from you and see if you have any outstanding questions, maybe things we didn't cover today, or would like us to elaborate on anything.
Thank you, ladies. So we do have a few questions. One was a comment that I think is a great question. When you were talking about, I believe it was about like talking with your managers and those beginning conversations. There's a comment that says, but managers always think they are right. So with the more kind of challenging managers, or the ones who maybe like micromanagers, or the ones who have a hard time in that space, how would that be? Because that would be a really challenging performance review, right? So are there some tips that you guys have to better prepare, or how to like steer that conversation if there's a manager who might not be aligning with everything that you guys have been saying?
Yeah, sure, I can take that one. So hopefully your company has a performance review process in place. What we see for a lot of our clients who we actually create performance review processes for is it will include a self-review portion, a manager review, and then an upward feedback portion as well, so that there's feedback on all ends. As we mentioned quite a few times in the presentation, we encourage everyone to be super specific. So if you would just ask your manager for specific examples to actually support the feedback that they're giving you, and as you're preparing to go into that conversation, have your own specific examples of things you've done well and maybe things that you've acknowledged you can improve upon, and you have those specific examples ready to discuss. That can help to steer the conversation a bit. If you are, working with a toxic manager, maybe there is a suggestion made that there is more than just that manager actually in your performance review. That's something that I think we all need to be comfortable advocating for ourselves. And if your relationship maybe isn't where it could be with your manager, and there is someone else in your company who supports you, maybe it's a suggestion of asking for feedback from other managers. We call that 360 feedback, or actually having someone else sit in on that performance review.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Agree with Celia completely. The only other thing I would say is when communicating with your manager, using like I feel statements. So saying like, when you do this, it makes me feel. If you're trying to communicate that the way that you're working together just isn't working well, instead of saying you're a micromanager or you're micromanaging me, saying when you follow up with me, it makes me feel like you don't trust me. How can we work towards building that trust? Again, so it's not accusatory, but they're still understanding that that behavior is affecting you in a negative way.
Thank you. I like that. I feel that's good. I was literally just about to say that. I feel that works for like any relationships, right? Any communication.
100%. People
with
can't
your
argue
partners.
with your feelings, right?
Right,
So
right.
if you're accusing someone of you're a micromanager, no, I'm not. When you follow up with me all the time, it makes me feel like you don't trust me. They can't argue with that. That's your feeling.
Right. Feelings are valid. I love that. That's a great point. Thank you, ladies. All right. Next question. I just returned from maternity leave. Is this a bad time to discuss a raise?
Great question.
This is a great one. Maternity leave should not impact your performance. Each company has not all companies have parental leave policies, but let's say based on the fact that you actually were able to take maternity leave, it was in accordance with the parental leave policy. That is time that is provided to you by the company for you to spend time with your new baby. And that time away from the office should not affect your performance at all. That being said, I'm sure all of the proper planning was done and the coverage was planned for the time that you were out, so on and so forth. So with all of that being said, I would handle a compensation conversation the same way that Tessa reviewed in our how to ask for a raise slide, going off of whenever your last compensation change was made, looking at your performance as a whole over the course of the last year or however long it's been since that raise, and really look at compensation outside of the fact that you are returning from maternity leave. I would really not even take that into account. One thing though, as just a segue with this question, as we're talking about compensation, is it is a weird time right now in the world. COVID has affected many companies. I'd be surprised if it hasn't affected almost every company that everyone on this call works for. So I would say just in general, when going into compensation conversations, especially, this year in 2020 when it has been such a funky one. Just be sensitive of that. Some companies are super transparent as far as their financials and their performance goes. Others are not. So I would just say this might be a good opportunity just for me to throw this in there because we didn't cover it in the presentation. This might be a time just to be sensitive to that.
Thank you. Yeah, that was a question. Yeah, I think I didn't think about that, about looking at performance as a whole, not necessarily just a certain time. I think that for some reason, that was something that just didn't click for me, is that, because you think about things so short term, right? Like you reflect on everything like, oh, I didn't do this, or yes, I did this really great. But taking a step back and kind of taking a high level view of your overall performance, I think will help, kind of release some of that tension or that anxiety around it. Especially if you're just focusing on one thing, like, being gone for maternity leave or, anything else. I think that's really important to have that awareness. Great points. Thank you, ladies. Right. So next question is, we are asked to provide reflections on our performance before our reviews. Is this a good time to include a request for a title change or wait until in person?
Great question. So I'm actually glad to hear that's how they do it. That's probably how we would recommend doing it as well, is kind of doing your self-reflection first and then having a conversation with your manager about your self-reflection. And then again, asking like, are we aligned? Is my self-reflection how you reflect me in that self-awareness piece? This is tough. I don't necessarily, Celia, you can correct me if you disagree. I would say have that conversation, have that as part of the conversation. I think that you can document, I guess it depends on what they're asking you, but to reflect on like, this is the work that I've done. This is how I think I've performed. And then as part of the conversation, when you're meeting with your manager, maybe bring that up, like, based on my reflection and the conversation that we're having right now, it seems like my role really fits more X, Y, and Z. And I've been thinking about, maybe it makes more sense for my title to be X. What do you think? Or, do you agree with me? What could that look like? So I would say keep that as more of the conversation. My concern is if you put it in the writing and they review it, that's like the only thing they're going to look at before they have this conversation. And you want to make sure that they are focused on your review and your performance first, and then you can bring it up as part of the conversation. Celia, I don't know if you agree with that or not.
I agree with that. I think if you put it in writing, like you said, your manager will likely obsess over it and won't be looking at everything like holistically. So yeah, it's a great time it is the time to talk about a title change for sure.
Can I ask a follow-up, thank you for that, given what you were just saying about like this particular time financially? Is it a bad idea to request a title change without compensation? Like, is that ever an okay move?
I can tell
Absolutely.
you some of our clients have actually done that during this time period. So we have had, I can think of one client in particular where a couple of people did receive promotions back in April. Typically those promotions, like those title and responsibilities changes, would be tied with a compensation change, but the compensation change was actually put on hold until this month. And that was just based on the fact that the company, there's still a lot of unknowns, whether based on what you guys believe and what you're reading, we might be in some states entering another surge. And there is still a bit of uncertainty as far as just like the financial state of the world as it relates to COVID. So I don't think that would be a bad thing to just show like self-awareness in saying, this, based on my performance, based on my role, my responsibilities, I feel as though I'm really performing as a X, whatever that new title is. And I understand if the company isn't in a place right now to make an adjustment to my compensation, but I'd love to figure out a time frame or a timeline where that compensation change can go into effect in line with that title change. And your manager or the owner of the business, whoever it is you're talking with, is probably going to be so grateful that you were bringing that up and you're acknowledging that. And they might say, oh no, we're ready to make that compensation change immediately, hand in hand with that title change. Or they might say, thanks, I really appreciate that. We might make the title change, effective November 15th, but wait for the comp change till Jan 1, for example.
And echoing what Celia just said, I think it shows your investment in the team. Like, you're not just here for the money, you're here for the growth as well. But also make sure that you do decide on a timeline, because what I would hate for you is to not decide on a timeline and then 2 years go by and you've been doing manager's work but at a non-manager pay. And so I think that's an important piece to say, let's come up with a timeline together that makes sense. And maybe it is a year. I mean, I don't know, it'll really just depend, but at least you know that you're working towards something and that they've agreed. Or to even say, let's review this, let's come back to this conversation in 3 months, 6 months, so that at least you know that you have that coming on the calendar and that you don't have to stress about it or feel weird about bringing it up again.
Awesome. These are really great questions. All right. So a few more. Okay. So this is the same person. I feel you on this. Is it Tan, maybe? How do you deal with a manager that, well, I should say for the record, this is past managers, not my current manager. I love you for him. How do you deal with a manager that has a lot to say about your review, but they never spend time with you? One-on-ones always get canceled at least 6 times. Oh, yikes. I'll let you guys take that.
So that's feedback. That's feedback that you need to give to your manager, right? And upward feedback's really hard. But that's exactly, you need to say that to your manager. Like, I really would like more time with you. We have these scheduled one-on-ones and I feel like often they're canceled or rescheduled time and time again. And it's important. I'm asking you, I need that time with you. That's what I recommend.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I tried that. That didn't work. She literally canceled every single one we've had. And then, the year-end review, she blindsided me. I'm like, how do you even say that when not once in 6 months have you brought any of this up?
Did you say that to her?
Oh, yeah.
In so few words?
Pretty much. And then I brought it up with her boss, which is the director. You know what he said? We never even got a chance to discuss it because he said he heard everything from the manager. I'm like, isn't it your job to listen to 2 sides of the story? And then with HR involved, of course, HR is like, they didn't see a problem with the review. I'm sitting there with my new manager, stunned, because nobody listened. So, with that kind of left a really bad impression, that you didn't listen. And then her boss, who is a director, executive level, says he heard from her. He didn't need to hear from me. HR came in. I don't see a problem. So how do you address something like that? It was like, I felt like I was a losing battle, and the only person that supported me was my new manager in a new position. And I'm sitting there with her and I'm like, I just started with you. This is not work.
That's tough. That's really tough. ladies, do you want to maybe offer some sort of like alternative? I mean, I shameless plug here, but if these are consistent issues or challenges that you're running into at this current job, if it's a possibility to, explore something else, because hey, as everyone here knows, working consistently, you spend most of our days at our jobs. And if we're constantly being, brought down or not treated fairly at work, and that's something that you truly, truly stand by, that's a value, that's something that's really important to you, you deserve to have a different experience. You deserve to have another opportunity, another job where those things are aligned. I know it's challenging given everything going on right now, but something to keep in mind. That's exactly what we do here with Amlovita is, helping people kind of transition, recognizing what's not working. And unfortunately, a lot of the times it is bosses and managers and upper executives. So it is challenging, but just know that there are options. And of course, we're here to help. But I'll see if Celia and Tessa have maybe some other alternative, if anything, to help with this. This is tough. Thank you for sharing that.
All I was going to say is essentially what Jill just said is ultimately there's only so much you can do. And if it isn't the right fit and you feel like you aren't being heard, not only by your direct manager, by upper leadership as well as HR, it might be a time to look into, another opportunity, because it sounds like you really have done everything you should be doing.
Thanks,
I don't know,
Tessa.
Celia.
I don't have anything else to add. I think you
Okay,
guys.
Yeah. That's tough. That's a tough one. But I think that, just recognizing that there are, there's options, so don't, I know it feels like, we might be stuck there. And I know that we could be easily, but just know that there are, other options out there, because it is really hard to, as an employee, it's not always easy for us to change the way upper management and a whole, executive system runs. So I think sometimes it's just to accept and bow out, but we'll be here to support you if you need it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I know that's tough. All right. So another question from JC. What if you have glowing reviews from clients, customers, guests, but it's not how your micromanager boss sees you?
I would recommend printing those out. I was in this situation when I first started my career. I saved everything, every nice Slack message that I got, email, any, let's call it like praise that I got, or positive feedback from people that I worked with or from customers. I actually saved in a folder in my email, one, so I could look back on it on a day that maybe wasn't going the way that I wanted it to, and I just needed a bit of a pick-me-up. But also, I used that as examples that I could share in performance reviews. Your manager might not be privy to all of that information. They might not be as involved or in tune, and may not be, seeing or receiving that feedback from those people. So I would encourage you to share it. If at that point they still are not seeing you in the same light that others are, maybe they're not appreciating you the way that perhaps you deserve to be appreciated. As Jill was just saying, you can't always change people. So there are bad managers, and as much as we, being in HR, as much as we try to provide leadership coaching and training, and we provide direct feedback in order to, improve the way that, leaders are leading, you can only do so much. So I would recommend taking a stab at that and sharing the feedback with them if possible, and seeing if that's something that works. And if nothing else, it should cheer you up by being able to reference back to those nice notes.
That's great. I love that. I want to do that, Celia.
I still have
Folder
it.
like that.
Like 10 years ago. I can go back. But
That's a great idea. I love that. Yeah, you can't deny proof.
Mhm.
And if your manager still denies it, then I will just say it's time for a new job. All right. Okay. Lots of questions. This is great. Okay. What do you do about researching salaries when the company is based out of a different state than you are? They're expanding now to have more remote workers too. Should I be researching salaries in my state or theirs? Ooh, that's great.
Are you
I
the
thought of
only
that.
remote employee, or are there multiple remote employees? I think it would depend on that.
Lindsay, if you are able
Multiple
to.
remote.
Multiple remote employees. Now, I mean, I think I started off as one of like the first 3, but now we're expanding to more and more.
So I would do it based off of where you're living, because you'll hear like the term cost of living increases, for example. The cost of living is different in every state. And if the company is doing a compensation analysis, they're doing it and the company is like vastly remote or has a vastly remote population. I can tell you just from, I'm going through this right now with one of our clients, they're going to be looking at your zip code where you're living. They're not just going to be looking at, let's say it's based in Chicago, but there are employees throughout the US or throughout, the globe. So I would base it off of where you're living. If you're one of, let's say, multiple people in the same role who are all remote, the company might look at that a little bit differently. So let's say, like, for example, you're an account manager and the company has 15 account managers. The company may actually come up with like a paid band or a range for all account managers based on the different zip codes that the account managers actually reside in. Especially now, given that so many companies do have so many people who have gone remote, that is definitely becoming the norm, rather than just looking at, where the headquarters is based out of.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Okay. All right. Well, so there's just another comment from JC, similar challenging managers. He had JC had a brag box, but the manager just seemed to get more and more angry when clients would praise me in front of him. I always give the credit to my fantastic and hardworking staff in front of clients. Maybe send your manager over my way and I can do some health and wellness coaching with you. Because that's really tough if your manager is getting jealous or angry at your wins. That's a tricky one.
I would communicate with HR about that.
Yeah.
I would recommend that you reach out to, hopefully you have HR. If not, give us a call. But reach out to a representative and just confidentially have that conversation to see their perspective, because that's something that's concerning, and that we would want to make sure that that's reported to their manager as feedback. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, go to HR.
Definitely.
Yeah. Yikes, that's a tough one. But again, I feel for anyone who is struggling with that, because with any sort of managerial relationship, because especially now and still having to work, it's the last thing that you really want to be worrying about. So I feel you guys. All right, so it looks like this is the last one for now. Please, everyone, we still have 8 minutes, so keep the questions coming. You guys have fantastic questions. This is great. All right, I've been working as a temp and have been asked to work full time. Can I negotiate a raise?
Go for it, Celia.
Now is the time to do it. When you're entering a new role, that is the easiest time to negotiate your compensation. So absolutely, the company has already showed you that they like you enough and are like very happy with your work clearly, to the extent that they want to extend full-time employment to you. So you know that you're already in very good standing. That's a huge compliment, and shows that you are doing a great job. So yeah, you absolutely should do research into what a full-time employee would be paid for the role that you're currently, temping for, and feel comfortable to actually have that negotiation conversation.
Absolutely. Do your data, bring your data.
Definitely.
Data.
Data.
Awesome. All right. Okay, another one. As for the title change request, so I think this is Heather. As for the title change request, would you wait until receiving feedback or open the in-person meeting with the request?
I would wait till you receive the feedback, like have the conversation in the format that the conversation's outlined. So like in this case, you've done your self-reflection, your manager has likely seen that, you're going to have a conversation about how you view your performance, how they view your performance, and then hopefully that will organically show that you've been doing an amazing job and you've been going above and beyond your current title. And that will just give you that segue and open up those doors for you to bring up the title. So rather than starting it, let the proof kind of come out in the conversation to support what you're going to ask before you ask for it.
Great. And then one more thing. Oh, sorry. Would you come with like an updated job description or anything like that, or just let that be like, I can share after this meeting, I can share supporting documents?
The more prepared you are, the better. If you come in there with a updated job description, that's one less thing that your manager actually has to take away from this performance conversation. And that would be amazing. Maybe you run out of time to actually go through it in that meeting, but at least they have it as a takeaway to review on their own. And then you can schedule a follow-up conversation to go through it.
100%. That's great. The more you can bring to the meeting, the better. So that's a great idea.
Awesome. All right, another one. Can you renegotiate for perks after you've been hired? Example, dry cleaning, commuter pass, gym membership, etc. Or maybe when can you negotiate those perks?
I think a lot of these perks depend on the company. So like if your company offers all these things, amazing. Dry cleaning that's an awesome one that I do not see very often.
I haven't heard that one before. That's awesome.
Like, wow, that is cool. So if your company offers all of these perks, they're likely offering them to all employees. I actually haven't seen an example, with the exception of I'd say like executive perks. I actually haven't seen an example where some employees get certain perks and others do not, especially when it comes to FSA, HSA. That's something that a company would offer to all employees. Like legally, you can't pick and choose who you would offer that to. Commuter benefits as well. If your company has FSA commuter benefits, then those are offered to all employees. If you're looking more specifically as far as like what the company is contributing to those benefits, like if the company is contributing money to your commuter benefits rather than it just being a tax-free chunk of change that goes into an account every pay period that you're able to use for trains, like say trains, planes, and automobiles, but no planes. But unless they're contributing, there really isn't much to negotiate on FSA, HSA, or commuter. These other things, if you know that some people have them in the company and they're not widely distributed, then yeah, this would be something that you could bring up in a compensation conversation. I just saw
the other thing
automatically came with my hotel manager jobs. Okay, that makes sense because you guys probably had an in-house dry cleaning. service, I'm assuming, working as at a hotel. That's awesome. So yeah, if that's something that's offered to some and not all, then I would say bring it up in a compensation conversation. Or if it's not something if it's not a perk that's being offered and you have a great idea for a perk that could be offered by the company, bring it up, because I know being in HR, we love hearing what other companies are doing and ways that we can increase our total rewards.
The other thing I would say is if it is like a one-off that's specific to you, if someone says, let's say that you do your market analysis and you're like, oh shoot, I am within market. Like, how can I ask for more when my research shows that I'm already there? Maybe you are commuting 15 miles a day. So maybe what you say to them is, I'm commuting 15 miles, 30 miles a day, 15 there, 15 back. I've done the math. Here's how much I'm paying for gas. Like, instead of increasing my compensation, I'd like an additional stipend for gas, or I'd like an additional X, Y, and Z to cover this, and show how you're tying what you're asking for to the actual like company need, or why they should be compensating. So again, dry cleaning makes sense for hospitality. I don't know that you would ask that anywhere else. Like it would have to make sense for why they're compensating for that. But if it does make sense, it can be, you can do the math and kind of come up with creative ways that they can still provide a benefit to you that's helpful, that without necessarily like giving you an increase in your base salary.
Yeah, definitely. And I saw, JC, you just followed up and we're short on time, but career development, when it comes to like educational stipends or allowances to attend conferences or virtual webinars or virtual trainings that may have a fee associated with them, that is also definitely a good time to bring this up in a performance review. That's a great time to bring that up as you're talking about where you want to go in your career and your professional development. And then also coming prepared with ideas of how you actually can get there. Maybe you have specific conferences that you want to attend or a specific program. Come prepared with those ideas, just like how we were talking about coming prepared with a job description. The more prepared you are, the easier you're going to make it for your manager to actually move on a request, right? You're taking things off their plate and showing them that you're invested, you've done the research, and just ultimately making their lives easier. So yeah, you definitely should be taking advantage of that. Yeah, you're welcome.
Awesome. Well, everyone, we are at time. I think that was probably one of the longest Q&As I've had on these webinars in a very long time, actually, I think ever. So thank you all so much for these great questions. And we will, the email that we sent out before, that's humans behind there, that's me. So Celia and Tessa are going to be on that email. So please, if you have any other questions, because I know a lot of these are very individualistic. So please, this is what they do. This is their specialty. This is exactly what they do. So please feel free to reply back and just ask those questions, because we feel you. We know what it's like to be in these really challenging positions, especially given this climate. It just makes things feel so much heavier and so much worse. But just know that you always have options, that you don't have to necessarily settle. Work Friendly is here to help you with those specific, talent acquisition, HR, all of that stuff that's needed. This is needed. It's much, much needed, especially people who have challenging managers. HR, you need that. But then, of course, the other side of that, and that's why we love working with Work Friendly and partnering with them, is that on the other side of that, we do have that career coaching. So if you are thinking about, okay, this might be the time, there is no better time than right now to really start exploring that. So I'm actually just going to go ahead and put a link in the chat. And this is for a free consult with one of our relationship strategists. And so what they will do is that they will help you to kind of just ask questions like, what are your goals? What kind of company, even if you don't know what kind of company you want to work for next, We don't need those details. We specifically ask you, like, what excites you? What do you like about your current role? What don't you like? All of those questions, you don't have to have, you can be like, I don't know what I want to do. Help me, and we will help you. So
We've
please
all
take
been there.
advantage of that. Yeah, exactly right. We've all been there, and we all know that there are options to get out of that. So take advantage of that. It's a free consult. It's free help. So, of course, take advantage. And also, thank you again, Celia and Tessa. This was so helpful and obviously much needed. So fair warning, we'll probably be doing this again in the new year because I think everyone needs all of this information. And please, like I said, reply back any of the questions that you guys have. I'm just designating you guys to answer all of them. Oh yes. And there you go. I probably should have asked that. Sorry. Work friendly. There you go. Oh wait, hang on. That was I didn't reply to everyone. There you go. All right, cool. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. And Celia and Tessa, you both are so wonderful. So grateful that we get to work with you, and grateful for your time today. So thank you all.
so much. This is
Thanks,
wonderful.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you. Have a good one.
Bye, everyone.